welcome to Finextra. I'm Emily Haller and I'm here with Alain Raes from Swift, and we're at Sibos 2016 in Geneva. Thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Cyber is a major topic at this year's Sibos. What have you been hearing at the conference and from delegates so far about their perception of cyber and the impact it's having on the industry?
There is a very quick analogy that you can actually refer to when you talk about this problem. Let's imagine that I'm sure that you've seen these movies, Die Hard 2 or 3. You might have seen Goldfinger as well. At the time, you want to rob a central bank, you had actually to attack it, right? With machine guns and everything. Here you have a situation whereby basically the bad guys, the cyber criminal, can actually attack a central bank behind their sofas in the salon with computers and all that, and make actually the same damage into the bank. So that happened in a country in Asia, in Bangladesh. There has been a few other cases as well, elsewhere as well. And that tells you a bit about the size of the problem as well that we need to address as a community, not only at Swift, but clearly as a community. We clearly at Swift, we are very sure and very certain about one thing, is that the network or system have not been compromised. This is not really about us, but as we are a community, we are actually working with all the banks that you see here around. We have 11,000 clients, banks in the world, 212 countries. We need to act together, and we feel an obligation to actually doing something. And that's why actually we're now taking actions. You've heard a lot about those actions throughout Sibos. Our CEO, Gottfried Leibrand, has been addressing this in a keynote speech 2 days ago. She's explaining what we're trying to do to making sure that the kind of situation that the industry is facing will not repeat anymore in the future.
So Swift launched its customer security program this year to support the Swift community. Can you outline the program's key objectives?
Precisely the program I was referring to. So I think the best way to actually talking about it is talking through a three pillars model. One is about the banks, what I would call the U, right? It's the banks, how can we help them to further strengthen their protection against cyber criminals, against attacks. And therefore this, we've defined a certain number of actions that they'll have to take to making sure that the environment where they do operate is actually fully protected. They'll have to implement a certain number of checks. They'll have to making sure that they operate with the latest upgrade, the latest release of the software they need to have to get access to the network. And not only that, they'll have also to making sure that what they do is being known to their counterparties. So banks will have to go through a program of self-attestations to making sure that everyone knows in the industry how well each and every of the participants are actually adhering to the recommendation that we have. The second pillar of this program is about the counterparties of the bank. The first one was about the banks themselves, protecting them. The second one is about their counterparties. How do we make sure that as you can be completely protected, how can you make sure that your counterparty actually is not compromised and that you keep eventually working with those guys? Then actually we have different ways to tackling the problem. Ways that can happen, or action that can happen before the event, action that can happen after the event, and eventually in the future, action that actually we can undertake in the fly. Before the event, we have already since many years what we call our EMEA, ways in which that banks are actually establishing their relationship over the network. This is actually existing for many years. Do you know, as our chairman said, that actually 98% of all the EMEAs that you have today in the system are not being used anymore. So there's clearly a need there to rationalizing, to make this a lot more efficient than in the past, and eventually even to use the later version of EMEA, getting much more in granularity for providing the access to the counterparties. Post-event, there, as of the beginning of next year, we'll be introducing what we call our new data report. These are data that banks will get access to that will help them to reconciling the data that they have inside of their banks with what we have, and eventually doing this, identifying whether actually something is happening that they don't know. And then finally, in the fly, is there ways in which that we can control a bit better the patterns that are happening on the system between two banks, a bit like credit card schemes are using when you travel into another country where you haven't been for a while. You swipe a card and somebody is calling you and say, "Sir, is that really you actually making this payment?" We may have to implement this either at the level of the banks or eventually also within Swift. That is much more longer term, Right? We need to work by priorities as well, but there may be ways in which we can do that in the future within SWIFT or within the banks as well. And then finally, the last pillar is about your community. Banks in one side, their counterparties, and finally their community. And that is a lot about sharing information, sharing about what's going on in each and every environment, sharing the bad stories, perhaps anonymously, but clearly sharing what is happening, because there is a need to learn from each other. There is a need to learn from the case that you see and taking the actions from there to avoiding what is happening. SWIFT is doing this already. We're sharing a lot of information, but we'd like to find ways in which that we can actually do this all together, and then eventually having a sort of a data repository where we can store this information. So that's the program we have. It's going to take time. It's not something we'll be able to roll out in a few months, but we are very much certain that by undertaking all these actions all together as a community, we'll make sure that what we've heard through the week is not happening anymore.
So what are the key milestones that have been reached so far?
So there are already stuff that we do. So we haven't been waiting for Sibos announcements and all that to taking actions. For instance, EMEA that I mentioned, we are already working with many banks to clean up their database, making sure that what they have today is becoming more efficient and really used. When it comes to software upgrade, we have already released actually many new release of our platform to making sure that banks can use the latest updates of technology and cyber protections. Two-factor authentication is already part of our software. There are already actions we've taken to making sure that it becomes already a lot more solid, right? But obviously, more will come. For instance, the self-attestation program that I was talking to you about will be done officially as of the beginning of next year, and we'll leave a year to the bank to making their self-attestations. In the meantime, very soon will be released to the industry all the detailed technical check that banks will have to do to to announce to the industry the compliance to all the actions that we are taking. So that is happening. Some actions have taken place already. More will come over the next few months, and the rollout of all of that will take, I would say, certainly another 12 months ahead of us.
Alain, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you for watching.